3 yellow backpacks. That was how Marcus Webb had marked every September since 2017. 3 identical yellow backpacks lined up by the front door the night before the first day of school. Each one packed identically. Each one labeled in his handwriting. James, Jordan, Jasmine. He had been packing those backpacks alone for 6 years. Because 6 years ago, his wife Denise had left. Not slowly, not ambiguously, but completely. On a Saturday in April, with a suitcase and no forwarding address, and a note on the kitchen counter that said she wasn't built for this, and she was sorry. The triplets were 18 months old. Marcus Webb was 32. He had called his mother. He had called his sister. Then, he had put the note in the drawer under the kitchen phone, looked at his 3 18-month-old children asleep in their cribs, and figured out what came next. On the afternoon of November 3, 2022, Marcus Webb stood at the Family Feud podium with his sister, his mother, his neighbor, and his best friend around him, and told Steve Harvey, when asked, that he was raising triplets alone. Steve Harvey said, "How old are they now?" Marcus said, 7. Steve said, "Are they here today?" Marcus said, "No, they're at school. They don't know I'm here." Steve Harvey smiled at Marcus Webb with the smile he reserves for moments that are about to become something larger than anyone in the room has planned for. He said, "Are you sure about that?" It was a November afternoon in Atlanta. Marcus Webb had come with his people. His sister Renee, who had driven up from Macon and who had been his emergency contact, his secondary child carer, and his person for 6 years without being asked to be any of these things, and without requiring any acknowledgement that she was, his mother Gloria, 67, who came from Charlotte and who had bought a second set of children's dishes, specifically for Marcus's house so the triplets always felt at home when they stayed with her. His best friend Devin, who coached youth basketball and had taken James, Jordan, and Jasmine to every single game for 2 years so Marcus could work a Saturday shift without childcare costs. And his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, 71, who watched the triplets on Tuesday evenings so Marcus could take a 2-hour class at the community college. Because Marcus had decided in year 3 of single parenting that letting his own education stop was not something he was willing to accept. Marcus Webb was 38 years old. He was a warehouse shift supervisor. He had the build of someone who had not slept a full night consecutively in 6 years and had gotten stronger instead of weaker from it. He laughed easily and quickly, the way people who have had to hold things together learn to laugh, fully, at whatever was genuinely funny, without reserve. Because humor had been a survival mechanism, and it had worked, and he was not going to be precious about it. Steve Harvey liked him in the first 30 seconds. You could see it happen. The other family, the Hendersons from Atlanta, an aunt and her 4 adult nieces who had taken a day off work collectively to be here, played enthusiastically and with clear affection for Marcus's energy. When Marcus scored a high answer in round 1, the Henderson family applauded from across the stage. Nobody in that studio knew what the production team had been arranging for the past 3 weeks. A production coordinator named Brianna, who had done this kind of work before, who understood what it meant to find the people who needed to be in a room without telling them why they were coming, had contacted Gloria, Marcus's mother, 2 weeks after the casting confirmation. Gloria had said yes immediately. Renee had said yes faster. Mrs. Patterson had said yes and then asked if she needed to bring anything. Devin had asked what he should wear. James, Jordan, and Jasmine Webb were 7 years old. They had been told by Gloria on the morning of the taping that they were going on a special trip to Atlanta with Grandma to see a surprise. They had been in the production green room for 90 minutes. James had eaten all the snacks. Jordan had made a drawing on the back of a production memo. Jasmine had asked the green room handler 6 times when they were going to see Daddy. The game ran its full course. Marcus played well. He was good at this, the reading of a room, the quickness, the willingness to commit to an answer and live with whatever followed. The Hendersons were good too, and competitive, and the game was genuinely close through both rounds. Marcus answered a fast money round where he needed 109 points and scored 112. The audience erupted. Marcus raised both hands. He turned to Renee, who hugged him so hard his feet briefly left the floor. Steve Harvey came to the center stage. He congratulated Marcus. He said, 112 points. You won $20,000 today. He paused. He let the moment settle. Then he said, but I have to ask you something. You said the triplets are at school today. They don't know you're here. Marcus said, right. Steve said, are you sure about that? Marcus looked at him. Steve turned toward the side of the stage. He said, somebody open that door. The side door of the studio opened. 3 children walked out. They were wearing their school clothes. James was still carrying a half-eaten granola bar. Jordan had the drawing she had made in the green room in her hand. Jasmine was already running before the door was fully open. Jasmine hit her father at full speed, and Marcus Webb caught her the way he had been catching all 3 of them since they were 18 months old. Completely, without bracing, as if he had always been exactly where they were headed. James walked. He was the deliberate one. He walked to the edge of the stage where his father was kneeling with Jasmine, and he put his hand on his father's shoulder the way a 7-year-old does when he is trying to be steady for someone, which is the most devastating gesture a child can make, and the studio fell completely silent. Jordan held up her drawing. It was a picture of a man with 3 children around him. She had labeled it in her handwriting, our dad. She gave it to Marcus. He took it with one hand. He was crying. Both hands were occupied, one holding Jasmine, one holding the drawing, and the tears were just there, on his face, unmanaged, because there were no more hands. The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey froze mid-step. His smile disappeared. He placed his cards slowly on the podium. He pressed his handkerchief to his face and then had to turn away from the camera. He walked a few paces and stood with his back to the audience. His shoulders moved. The crew was crying. The Henderson family was crying. Renee was crying. Gloria was crying with her hand pressed to her chest and her eyes closed. Mrs. Patterson was watching from the contestant row with a look on her face that contained 67 years of knowing Marcus Webb's mother and 6 years of Tuesday evenings with those 3 children, and it was the most complete look in the room. Steve turned back. He walked to Marcus Webb, who was still on the floor with 3 children around him. Steve sat down on the stage beside him, in his suit on the floor, and he said quietly, "Can I just sit here for a second?" Marcus laughed through the tears. He said, "Yeah, stay as long as you want." Steve stayed. Then he stood up. He pulled out his phone on the live stage, something hosts never do during tapings. He said, "This has never happened in the 45-year history of this show. A family winning, and their family walking through the door in the same minute." He dialed. He called Dr. Andrea Simmons, a family support coordinator at the Atlanta Child Development Center, a person Steve had worked with on an advisory board for 4 years. He put the call on speaker. He said, "Andrea, I have a single father on my stage. He has raised 7-year-old triplets for 6 years by himself, with the help of a community of people around him who showed up without being asked. I want to set up a full educational support consultation for those 3 children, school readiness assessment, tutoring access, enrichment programs, fully covered for the next 3 years. And I want to make sure their father knows what he's entitled to in terms of child care tax assistance. because I bet you anything he hasn't had time to figure that out. He looked at Marcus. Marcus's mouth was open. Steve said, "Close your mouth. You deserve this." He wasn't finished. He stood in front of the room. He said, "The $20,000 prize, that's yours. That's done. But I also want to say something to this room and to everyone watching at home." He turned to the cameras. He broke the fourth wall the way he always does when it matters most. He said, "I want to talk to every person watching who is doing this alone, who is packing 3 backpacks alone, who is going to teacher conferences alone, who is explaining to a child why there's only one parent at the recital. I need you to hear something." He paused. "You are not half a family. You are a whole family. What this man built in 6 years, with his sister and his mother and his neighbor and his best friend, is not a broken version of something. It is a complete version. It is exactly what family is supposed to look like. People who show up." He stopped. "And to the village, to Renee and Gloria and Devin and Mrs. Patterson, I see you too, because none of this was possible without you. The village is not the backup plan. The village is the plan." When the episode aired 6 weeks later, Jordan's drawing, Our Dad, had become one of the most reproduced images associated with Family Feud in the show's history. The clip of Jasmine running and James walking to put his hand on his father's shoulder had been viewed 176 million times from a production leak before the broadcast. The full episode drew 44 million viewers. The hashtag #OurDad trended in 47 countries for 12 days. A single father's advocacy organization cited the episode in their annual fundraising campaign. The campaign raised 3 times its target. 3 months after the taping, Marcus Webb had completed the school readiness assessment for all 3 children and enrolled Jordan in a reading enrichment program. He had also, with the help of a tax specialist connected through the Child Development Center, recovered $6,200 in missed childcare tax credits from the previous 2 years. He used $2,000 of it to buy a new refrigerator. The old one had been held together with painter's tape for 8 months. A year after the episode, Marcus Webb had completed his community college course. He was enrolled in a second. He had also started coaching the Triplets soccer team on Saturday mornings, which meant he and Devin were now co-coaching, which Devin said was basically what he'd been doing for 6 years anyway, but now it was official. James, Jordan, and Jasmine Webb are 8 now. James still walks deliberately. Jordan still carries things she has made with her hands, drawings, constructions, folded paper animals, and distributes them to people who seem like they need something. Jasmine still runs toward whatever she is moving toward at full speed. She has never stopped. Marcus says that is the thing about Jasmine. She has always been entirely sure where she is going, and she has never once waited to see if the landing was going to be okay before she left the ground. He thinks he knows where she gets it from. Devin, who had been co-coaching the soccer team since the episode, said in an interview that the morning after the taping was the first morning in 6 years that he had seen Marcus sleep past 7. He had come over to drop something off and let himself in with the spare key the way he always did, and the house was quiet. In a way it was never quiet, and he had stood in the kitchen for 20 minutes, not wanting to wake anyone up. He said, "That man has not slept past 6 in 6 years." He told me later it was the first time he had let himself stop. The first time he felt like he could stop. Devin paused. "I don't think most people understand what it costs to be the person who cannot stop, to be the one who is always the last one awake and the first one up." That was Marcus for 6 years. 7,000 days of not stopping. The episode didn't fix that, but it said, We see what you did. We see what it cost. And that was the first time anyone outside this family had said that out loud. The note that Denise had left, the one Marcus had put in the drawer under the kitchen phone, is still in that drawer. He has not thrown it away, and he has not read it again. He leaves it there the way you leave something that has lost its power to hurt you, but that you are not yet ready to dispose of entirely, because disposing of it feels like a decision you have not finished making. His community college counselor, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hayes, who has been working with adult learners for 18 years, had asked him once, in a session, whether he had found any peace around the circumstances of Denise's leaving. He had thought about it. He had said, "The triplets found it for me. They needed something from me every day for 6 years, and that need was so total and so constant that there was no space left for anything else. The grief couldn't get in. The anger couldn't get in. Just the need. And meeting the need." He paused. "I think that's what saved me. Not in a sad way. In a real way. They needed me too much for me to fall apart." Dr. Hayes had written something in her notes. Marcus had not asked what. Mrs. Patterson, who had watched the triplets on Tuesday evenings for 2 years, so Marcus could attend his community college class, had not known she was being honored in the episode until she watched it broadcast 8 weeks later. She had been in the audience during the taping but had not processed, in the moment, that when Steve Harvey said the village and looked at her, he was naming her specifically. She watched the broadcast in her living room with her daughter, and when Steve said her name, Mrs. Patterson, who watches the kids on Tuesday evenings so Marcus can go to class, she had put her hand to her mouth and kept it there. Her daughter said, "Mom." Mrs. Patterson said, "Hush." She watched the rest of the episode with her hand still over her mouth. When it was over, she called Marcus. He answered. She said, "You told him about the Tuesdays." Marcus said, "Of course I did." She said, "You didn't have to do that." He said, "Yes, I did." Gloria, Marcus's mother, took all 3 grandchildren for a weekend in Charlotte 6 weeks after the episode aired. She had been doing this periodically for 6 years, taking them for the weekend so Marcus could have 2 consecutive days that belonged only to him. She had never considered stopping, and she had never required acknowledgement. On this particular weekend, James, who was the deliberate one, the one who walked instead of ran and thought before speaking, had said to her on the second morning over cereal, without preamble, "Grandma, why do you always come get us?" Gloria had looked at her grandson. She had said, "Because I love you." James had considered this. He had said, "And because Dad needs rest." Gloria had said, "Yes." Both things. James had nodded. He had gone back to his cereal. Gloria had sat with that conversation for a long time after. She had told Marcus about it on the phone that evening. Marcus had been quiet. Then he said, "He doesn't miss anything." Gloria said, "He never has." If this incredible story of a father who kept showing up and the morning 3 children walked through a door touched your heart, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that a family is not a shape. It is a practice. Have you ever been raised by a single parent or been one yourself? Share your story in the comments. Because as Marcus proved, it is never too late for someone to walk through the right door at the right moment. Ring that notification bell for more stories that remind us that love does not need 2 people to be whole.